Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something I call Take the Doughnut, which for me is another way of saying carpe diem, seize the opportunity. And this year, something I wanted to do was to watch Halt and Catch Fire again and actually talk about it with other people, which is a novelty for me. And now we're up leveling this because I'm getting a chance to talk with people who actually worked on the show, which has been such a blast. And before I introduce my guest for today, just a quick housekeeping item here. Look, if you are brand new to the show, the episode recaps are safe for you. They're spoiler free, but these interviews are spoiler filled, and this one will definitely be spoiler filled. So please be aware of that before we jump in, because I'm about to introduce my wonderful guest, Annabeth Gish, who played Diane Gould seasons 3 and 4 on the show. Welcome.
Hi, Melissa. So happy to be here from my sound booth with kind of bad lighting, but here we go.
We love you in whatever way we can get you. This is amazing.
Thank
you. People who have been listening to the podcast, even though I haven't gotten to it yet in my coverage, because I'm only on season 2 right now, but I've already staked my claim that Diane Gould is not only my favorite character on the show, but in probably all of TV for me. So I'm really excited to talk with you about, what was going on with her, in your head, behind the scenes, all of that good stuff. And before we really get into it, I'm curious, how did you get on the show to begin with? What was that process?
Well, it's interesting. I remember the moment that I got the phone call about the offer to come join the show. I was at an event with my husband, and I had heard of the show. I had not watched it, but it was always known, as prestige television. It was just high level, intellectual, very much along the lines of West Wing, I think. And I knew there was an immediate. I wanted to do it for sure. It was one of those jobs that it was a little bit last minute, and I had to kind of rush to get ready to go. But it was an immediate yes, and I was thrilled to then fly to Atlanta.
Okay, so, and it sounds like they knew they wanted you. It was just an offer.
It was, yes. At that point, I did not have to audition. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's amazing. So, this show, at the point when you come into the show, it sort of goes more and more into like a feminist stance in seasons 3, and then definitely in season 4. We have really 3 really strong main characters who are women at the point when you come in. And, we meet Diane as a managing partner at a venture capital firm. How much did you know about where the tone of the show was headed, or even just where season 3 was going when you came on?
Well, there's just a certain stature of integrity, right? Like obviously I binged the previous episodes, and immediately it was class, it was intelligence, it was integrity. And I think regardless of that it went into the more of a feminist stance, it already, like from the beginning with Donna and Cameron as the leads, the 2 female leads, like it was just dignity, it was already set up that way. Every character was treated with respect. And then the way most things go in the world, I believe, behind every good man is a woman. And as silly as that sounds, that aphorism, I think there's just the Chris's had balls, and they were visionaries, and they were not afraid to let women lead their show. And yet there was never any power dynamic of the men are taking a back seat, I think that just they can write for those 2 actors. Carrie and Mackenzie are dynamic and interesting and powerful in their own elements. So they had that to just write for, and I was thrilled to be able to also join in that dynamic.
Oh, that's amazing. You know, when I look at the list of your credits on IMDb, there's a lot there, and you've been able to work on so many different projects over the years. What do you remember specifically about shooting this show? Like, how does it compare to other sets that you've been on?
Mm. There's something so beautiful about a show that is organic and real, and it's not so famous and overproduced that it loses its charm. You're all like, and Halt and Catch Fire always felt like we were working like on the best kept secret in Hollywood. So it stayed away from some of that hyper scrutiny and that hyper attention. Nobody was uber famous, and yet everybody just, I feel like there was just craft there. So, I joining the show felt smooth, seamless. Um, I think, it was really great to kind of just, I remember my first day, I had to just jump in, go straight into the 80s, the 80s wardrobe and 80s hair, which was a fun throwback. But it was great. And my first episode was directed by a woman, Daisy, and yeah, there was just this ethos of like, let's go. And Melissa Bernstein, I think the producer, the executive producer, had a lot to do with that too. She is a leader in Hollywood that very much like the characters, she's not, women in leadership do not have to be um bitchy, to have power. And I think that that's one of the things that this show really showcased.
Absolutely. You know, as you say that, I read a take from someone somewhere on the internet where they thought Diane Gould came in as an antagonist in season 3. And I never saw her that way myself. And I'm curious how you saw her at the start, in those opening episodes. Where do you think she began? And did your opinion of her change as time went on?
I I learned to really appreciate the nuance of Diane Gould and who they were trying to and did a good job of assert. You know, um, so often you come in and we think that a character is one way, especially if she's a woman in a man's world in tech, that and yes, she has to have uh, a dominance and an aggressive kind of, but it doesn't have to be alienating. And what I learned to love about Diane was that she just did it all with a manicured hand. There was elegance. She didn't like conflict, but at the beginning, her attitude towards these two was of as a mentor, wanting to be a mentor. And I think uh, it just was such an elegant example of how women in power structures can coexist and aspire to coexist.
Mm, that's one of the reasons why I love her for sure. When I think of Diane, I think of her as a very grounded character, but a character who lived a lot of life, perhaps to get to that place where she could be grounded. It's interesting the contrast between Diane and Donna, because when we see Donna in season 3 and the beginning of season 4, she's in some ways a little unhinged. She's trying to figure out who she is. She's developing a harder edge, but doesn't know how to control it. And then you've got Diane in contrast, who has that grounded feeling to her, but we know that she's been through a lot in her life. She's been through a divorce. She's trying to figure out how to navigate that with her kid. She's, like there's a lot there. And I'm curious, do you think that how much do you think she was always this grounded versus this is something new that we're getting to at this phase of her life?
Mm. Well, as in every woman and every person's life, I think we're all messy. And so that sort of parallel comparison of Donna and Diane, I think Diane went through a lot of shit to get to where she is. And And she's still going through some shit, right? Because she falls in love with Boz, and that's tricky. It's just that the idea behind the executive and the mentor is that never let him see you sweat. And we have the beauty of seeing Donna's early years and then Diane's later iteration and evolution, so that I mean, but yes, I think Diane was very messy and very haphazard, as we just didn't get to see behind the curtains on her earlier days.
Mm. And you mentioned that relationship with Boz, which is obviously a huge component of the story. And the first time they actually meet, I think Diane probably had already done some research on Boz at that point, but the first time they actually meet is when they go together to tender an offer to swap meat. Um, and in that setting, they kind of take a look at the office. They realize this isn't quite what we were being sold. It's less than what we were being sold. And so Boz plays hardball and he goes off script. And that seems to sort of catch Diane off guard, but also she rolls with it. So, what do you think her first impression was of Boz from that interaction?
Well, Boz, as again, every character in this show has its their own quirks and charms, and Boz from the get-go, and his cowboy boots and his just his attitude is fresh. And I think, at first she might be a little taken aback by how unpolished he is, but then innately that becomes what charms her and what she falls in love with. Um, and I think anyone, any character certainly wants to be surprised, taken by surprise. The mundane gets boring. So when we come upon someone or something who surprises us, then that is definitely charming. And I think she really saw that he had, underneath the surface, had a lot of other colors.
And then as she gets to know him better and they do fall in love and maybe the initial surprise wears off, what do you think keeps them together?
I think that that maturity, I think that mutual respect for having made it through the trenches of this crazy war zone of, new tech. I think it is, when later more mature relationships find each other, you have a different perspective, right? Maybe you don't take it all so seriously and you look to have fun in your companionship. And I think there's just a maturity about the two of them that really they find each other, and it's a lovely balm.
Mm, that's a beautiful way to describe it. In the scene that was a little less beautiful, there was a pretty big fight that happened in episode 307, which was the threshold, where there's a high stakes board meeting that happens. We get to a point where Donna and Cameron cannot work at the same company anymore. They're heading towards an IPO, but their ideas of what timeline they're going to be on for that are very different. And they either get there quickly and they do it Donna's way, or they take their time and they do it Cameron's way. And you're going to lose one or the other of them at that company. And you all have to vote. And it's such an intense scene. And there's a whole party happening outside at the same time, but what's happening in the boardroom is so intense. And I'm curious if you remember much about, working on that scene and what that was like for you.
Mm. Yes, yes, I remember that scene well. And as a person myself, Annabeth, I don't like conflict. I don't like it when people fight. I want everybody to get along, and I don't like breakups and those kinds of things. But of course, as an actor, it's like the meal to play. But again, and also that served me well, that instinct, because Diane, she's the executive. Donna and Cameron are the creatives, learning, and obviously Donna has more executive potential. But I think in that situation you're just trying to be strategic, trying to gauge what's going to happen, trying to say conflict resolution, but in the end it really is about money. and product and quality. And so I think she knows what's coming, Diane. But it was definitely one of those scenes that was fraught with a lot of tension. With as actors, you come into that kind of a scene with, I think, an amount of excitement and dread because you got to lay it all on the line. It's got to explode. It's got to be contentious. It has to mean something.
Absolutely. I am so interested in this relationship between Diane and Donna, because it feels like Donna's even though there are time jumps happening here, it feels like Donna's at this really critical moment in her life. And you described Diane as being sort of thinking of this as a mentorship.
Mhm.
So, from where we see Donna start in season 3, it's very much like learning to fly in this new venture capital environment. And then, after being, having a sort of her business taken out from under her, she gets a really hard edge starting season 4.
Mhm.
And she's just mean to everybody
Yeah,
around her.
yeah.
And then we're going to see Gordon pass away, and that like really disrupts her world and creates a softness. And Diane's there through that whole process. So how do you think Diane sees Donna during all this time? What does she want for Donna? What is that relationship like?
I think that's also the beauty of it being like a mentorship and a professional relationship as opposed to an actual blood mother-daughter situation, which is always has a whole other bunch of elements and heat to it, heat and love. I think there's a bit more neutrality and when it's a professional relationship, even though they're clearly invested in one another. I think Diane sees that where Donna is, teetering too much. She's dipping too much into the bitchy side, and then, but that's for. I always think of Diane as like the guardrails for Donna, you know, just like if she can help her course correct, um, as much as possible. Again, all under the umbrella of it being an employee partner relationship as opposed to a parent. So I think Diane is concerned about Donna. I think she's, uh, uh, the emotional weight of what she's going through is a lot, but I think she's also holding out hope that she'll pass through it.
I'm going to think about that metaphor of the guardrails when I go into those episodes in this rewatch, because I think that's a really good way of describing her function, with
Mm-hmm.
at least as it relates to Donna. I'm also curious what Diane thinks of Cameron, because we don't see quite as much sort of tutelage happening there, but there is still a mentorship happening in the fact that she's now sort of leading this company. So what does Diane think of Cameron?
I think, I think she sees immense talent and vision, and as any venture capitalist recognizes that that's the gold, but that gold can also be messy and uncontrollable. And as in the venture capital world, I think it's all about grooming. That potentially is the wrong word. Cultivating, excuse me.
Grooming without the baggage that
Without
implies.
without the weird, yes, exactly, without the weird associations with that. Cultivating the talent, but I think ultimately she sees Cameron as a loose cannon, and she knows that the two parts are necessary, the Donna and the Cameron, but she ultimately is going to put her money on Donna.
Hmm. I know I haven't really gotten into too many super specific scenes here, because it's been a minute since this show was filmed, but I'm curious if there are any scenes that really jump out for you when you think about working on this show. Any favorites that come to mind, or really challenging ones for that matter?
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes when I've worked on shows before, it all just kind of blurs together but I have very, very specific, vivid memories so many scenes. I mean, obviously, uh, the first scene when I'm in like introduced in the bathroom stall, I remember that. But but a lot of the boardroom scenes, the circling back and the drilling down, which I one of my favorite things. Um, Dancing with Toby in his garage is also Toby Huss for me, like he's such a brilliant actor and my favorite type of coworker because he and I have the same ethos. We're collaborators. We want to elevate the script. There's no ego, and yet there's just a certain suave. He's just so captivating, Toby, and so it was really lovely to dance, metaphorically and literally with him. Uh, and I will say also, the female directors on that show were incredible. I mean, whether it was Karen Kusama, Daisy, uh, oh my gosh,
Mayer, Von Schuyler Mayer.
yes, yes, her, yes, amazing. Kimberly Pierce, Reed Morano. I mean, it was like just leading the pack in terms of just great women who were. So I was always, as an actress coming onto a set, I also was a little bit of a Donna to to the Melissa Bernsteins and the directors who were leading the leadership roles with such panache. It was great. It was very, very inspiring. And Lee Pace and Scoot, just a highlight of a job. I honestly, in my career of a lot of work, the elements at play for *Halt and Catch Fire* were just superlative.
And I love that you shouted out a number of people there. And I'm curious, obviously this being a period piece, there were probably a lot of people behind the scenes who had to work really hard to bring Diane and that time to life. So are there any other people that you'd want to shout out from that perspective?
Oh gosh. I mean, well, our costume designer did an amazing job, as did the hair and makeup. I mean, it was like just instantly. What I love about period pieces is that you are transformed from the outside in, and it just when you wear shoulder pads and you wear high-waisted jeans and you wear, you know, Aquanet hair and big earrings, you just carry yourself differently. And I will say that our hair and makeup department were led by women and also of a certain age. They weren't teenagers, they were women of wisdom. And I always feel like it's just you just with age and maturity comes some knowledge, that isn't thrown away. So I very much appreciate the entire set and Jeff Freilich, our producer, Steph Aceta. I mean, it's just amazing, amazing humans who I'm still very good friends with.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And with that said, like, are there any favorite moments for you from behind the scenes on set, things that weren't being filmed?
Mm. Well, I freaking I can't say enough about Carrie and Mackenzie. They are a blast to work with, formidable, very talented. We laughed a lot in between takes and um the scene where I'm in the black dress smoking the cigarette at the bar, very
Mm-hmm.
elegant. That was kind of an iconic moment for Toby and I to really have some suave um that hair. I just keep Diane and her hair, her shoulder pads and her hair.
And there's such a, if you grab a still photo from that episode, it's like the woman in the
In
mermaid
the
costume.
yes, yes,
It's like
yes.
iconic.
I know. I know.
It's
I know.
unbelievable.
So
The
true.
picture that got painted there.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I love it. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to say about the show that I'm not asking about, but you would just want to make
Mm.
sure people know?
Well, I think the show as it exists in its perfect four seasons, right? Isn't it four seasons?
Hmm.
Um, I think it's such a wonderful time capsule. And it really is applicable to now in terms of seeing what like the inception of an idea, its growth curve, its explosion, and the the treasures and the pitfalls of success in venture capitalism. It's just but yeah, it's got heart, it's got leadership notes, it's got women themes. Um, I just think it's like I said before, it's a superlative show.
Mm. Thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything that you're working on now or that's been released recently that you want people to go see, something that you've been working on?
Well, I have uh Pretty Little Liars coming out in May, which is a little different in the campy sphere, but just as fun, and it's a fun romp. Again, I'm proud of working with all of those younger women as well who are phenomenal. So yeah, that's coming out, and then I have an indie film coming out called Ride. I think that comes out in July.
Can you say anything about that film?
Yeah, it's a modern day kind of Western crime thriller about bull riding.
Oh, cool. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
A different world from what Diane lives in, that's for
Oh, for
sure.
sure.
But
I
not
love
too far away from what Boz lived in, I guess.
exactly. They got the Lucchese boots for sure.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was just such a blast to hear you talk about this show and to hear
Well,
your takes on it.
I'm so glad that you're doing this, and I think any attention that can be drawn to the show, I'm all behind it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. And to everybody who's watching, go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everyone.
Bye.